The Sixth Law of Human Stupidity. Are All Humans Stupid? By Joel Cavazos. Copyright March 14, 2026. The problem with the world is that the intelligent people are full of doubts, while the stupid ones are full of confidence. End quote. Charles Bukowski, German-American poet and novelist 1920 to 1994. Man is a wolf to man. That this proverb is a sad yet eternal truism, and our wolf-like tendencies come most prominently into play at those times of history when mental illness becomes the norm rather than the exception in a society. It is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is man's greatest danger to man for the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes. End quote. Carl Jung, 1875 to 1961. Stupidity is not an absence of intelligence. Intelligence is not an absence of ignorance. Ignorance is an absence of information. Stupidity is intelligence acting in ignorance and being too arrogant to recognize it. End quote. Joel Cavazos, 1956. Part 2, Chapters 6 through 10. Chapter 6. Crowds, Power, and the Hypnotism of Stupidity. As Carlo M. Cipolla says, in Law Number 3, that a stupid person is a person who causes losses to another person or to a group of persons while himself deriving no gain and even possibly incurring losses. No amount of education can cure this fatal disease. Fatal? Yes, because it will eventually kill the followers and those who espouse these so-called universal truths. Mr. Cipolla continues saying, the second factor that determines the potential of a stupid person is related to the position of power and consequence that he occupies in society. Among bureaucrats, generals, politicians, and heads of state, one has little difficulty in finding clear examples of basically stupid individuals whose damaging capacity was, or is, alarmingly enhanced by the position of power that they occupied or occupy. Religious dignitaries should not be overlooked. End quote. So, stupidity can be found among these highly educated persons in positions of power. Scary to think about. Gustav Le Bon said in his book, The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. The most careful observations seem to prove that an individual emerged for some length of time in a crowd in action soon finds himself, either in consequence of the magnetic influence given out by the crowd, or from some other cause of which we are ignorant, in a special state, which much resembles the state of fascination in which the hypnotized individual finds himself in the hands of the hypnotizer. The activity of the brain being paralyzed in the case of the hypnotized subject, the latter becomes the slave of all the unconscious activities of his spinal cord, which the hypnotizer directs at will. The conscious personality has entirely vanished. Will and discernment are lost. All feelings and thoughts are bent in the direction determined by the hypnotizer. End quote. In other words, the crowd becomes a group of stupid people who all believe the same things, the same misguided philosophy, political views, religion, or scientific theories. This is what we see happening in our society and the world. This is the result of years of deliberate and sometimes unintentional indoctrination of people by our educational system and those in leadership roles. Those arrogant elites who feel they are the gods. The higher evolved who decide what truth is and is not. Who stupidly think this world cannot exist without them. They look at us as the inessential masses. Those of us whose population should be controlled, babies should be aborted, because we are using up precious resources the elite need. They just need enough people to keep making the products they need, flipping hamburgers, and cleaning their houses. Why else would it be against the law and cause you to be imprisoned if you do not send your children to school? Frank Zappa said, "Schools train people to be ignorant with style. They give you the equipment that you need to be a functional ignoramus." American schools do not equip you to deal with things like logic. They do not give you the criteria by which to judge between good and bad in any medium or format. And they prepare you to be a usable victim for a military-industrial complex that needs manpower. As long as you're just smart enough to do a job and just dumb enough to swallow what they feed you, you're going to be all right. End quote. Frank Zappa said these words in the early 80s, and Gustave Le Bon authored his book in 1895. There was no social media as we have today, and yet they both saw the power of the elites over the masses. Imagine the power over the human mind a fast-talking politician, religious leader, or philosopher can have on society and the world today. You may think this is an oversimplification of humanity. Consider this: politicians promise us freedom, but we are already free. They promise prosperity, and we are already prosperous. They promise wealth, and we are already wealthy. The poorest of the poor in the USA eat every day, bathe every day, or at least could if they wanted to, and have a place to sleep. If nothing else, a safe park bench. Been there, done that, as a young man and a hippie wannabe. We have been taught to blame others, rather than accept responsibility for our actions. Our politicians promote policies under the guise of human rights, and allow people who should be in some institution to live in the streets. Because of racially motivated arrogance, or simple cultural differences and stupidity, society fails to address the needs and care for those suffering from birth defects, depression, addiction and substance abuse, mental illness, and physical and mental trauma. As a society, we have discarded them to fend for themselves in the jungles of our city parks and abandoned buildings. Human beings are thrown out to the streets, the trash cans of life. But even these outcasts enjoy the freedoms of our great society. They live with no responsibilities, sometimes hurting others with no consequences, taking what does not belong to them, usually to survive another day. Defecating in public places, sleeping in public areas, threatening the general public. In many cases, we excuse the behaviors, and we say, where else can they go? Here's a thought. We could put them in institutions, perhaps rehabilitate them. We force our children by law to attend the public schools, and yet nothing is done to help these people. They are allowed to roam the streets, addicted to drugs, and we the taxpayers provide them with needles and syringes, living with mental illness and delusions, and committing petty crimes and sometimes horrific crimes. Why? Because the legal, medical, and mental experts say they have rights. The right to destroy their own body and life, and in the process harass the rest of us, and sometimes hurt others, including our children. Perhaps that is the intended outcome, because if the people in power wanted, laws would be passed. But no, many of us, of different ethnic groups, because this is not limited to any one group or skin color, are out in the streets of this great country. They have been mentally aborted. For years they have been told that they will never be given an opportunity. They have been broken by well-meaning parents and family, and some not so well-meaning school teachers and friends. I call this mental abortion. This mental abortion has helped propagate a lot of the stupidity in our society. All you have to do is listen to the news on your favorite source, and you hear of children murdering each other or their parents. Parents murdering their children or each other, violent protests, crooked politicians, false, deceitful clergy. There seems to be no end in sight. Chapter 7. The Pygmalion Effect, Mental Abortion, and Manufactured Victims. An article in Psychology Today says one of the earliest studies on expectations and performance is the Pygmalion effect. a phenomenon where higher expectations lead to better performance. In a famous study by Rosenthal and Jacobson, 1968, teachers were told that certain students were expected to excel academically. These students, who were randomly selected, ended up performing better, simply because their teachers believed they would. That belief could manifest itself in a variety of ways, including the benefit of the doubt as it relates to student performance, teacher self-reflection as it relates to their own actions, and perhaps more importantly, their actions toward building the student's self-efficacy as it relates to new content. While this shows that positive expectations can improve outcomes, the flip side is equally true. Low expectations can create self-fulfilling prophecies, where individuals perform poorly because they believe they're expected to fail. End quote. What a surprise! God calls those that believe in Him saints. Saints? Really? Have you met some of them? You do not want to be on the same highway with me, but God calls me a saint, because that is what He expects from me. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 23 verse 7, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he." End quote. King James Version. Like everything in life, I am sure, when considering the Pygmalion effect, there are exceptions to the rule. When considering the stupidity that causes mental abortion, and that stupidity is then the result of the mental abortion of others, we can see it is self-propagating. We also must understand that stupidity is extremely hard to understand and diagnose. For example, in the following case is the individual such as a parent, teacher, or other person who destroys an individual's self-worth and thus mentally aborting an individual stupid? If we consider the definition, which is the third law, which states that a stupid person is a person who causes losses to another person or to a group of persons while himself deriving no gain and even possibly incurring losses. The initial reaction, perhaps out of anger, would be to say the aggressor is stupid. However, the aggressor could also be a thief or murderer. If there is some sort of perceived gain or pleasure from the destruction of the other individual's self-worth and confidence, or if the individual is on some power trip or has an agenda that entails the dumbing down and the control of certain sectors of the population and society, seeking to achieve the reduction in population or the enslavement of a certain ethnic group or class of people, the aggressor is not stupid, but is rather a thief, and perhaps a murderer of those groups of people. Many of these individuals are creating stupid persons by indoctrination and deceit. Why? Many times, for the purpose of creating a social order, to regulate, control, and manipulate a certain percentage of the population, or both. So yes, stupidity is an ancient disease that has been the cause of death of thousands, or perhaps millions, but in many cases the masses were manipulated with words and convinced that their actions are not stupid. Ask yourself, what is worse, to take a person's life by murder, or to slowly take a person's life by destroying their self-image, who they think they are? To allow a person to live in a state of ignorance and stupidity, unaware of their potential and abilities to influence and contribute to the benefit of another person, their family, their city, their country, or even the world. To make another feel useless, that the world is out to get them because of their ethnicity and physical appearance, their uniqueness, or characteristics. Sadly, our schools and social leaders, politicians, and influencers have done that to millions of people, as Frank Zappa pointed out back in the 1980s. This is a horrendous crime, an unpardonable sin, and a disservice to the world. Persons who have, in many cases themselves, been hurt, and in some cases well-meaning, tell others that the world will never give them a chance. That because of the color of their skin, where they were born, who their parents were, or their sexual preferences, God, nature, luck, and/or society, basically the world, have rejected them. The person is made to feel they are screwed from birth. And we wonder why our children grow up hating who they are, angry at God, society, and the world. They are broken, spiritually and mentally murdered before they ever start. They have been spiritually and mentally aborted. And the world loses a great scientist, doctor, philosopher, singer, and worst of all, a great parent. A mom or a dad that will not be there. Why do I call it mental abortion and stupidity? Because their minds are destroyed, and the result of a dead mind is stupidity. Anyone who is free to be prosperous and wealthy and does not know it is stupid. Don't you agree? Chapter 8. Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Warning. Stupidity is more dangerous than evil. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil. It can be exposed and, if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion in that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's prejudgment simply need not be believed. In such moments the stupid person even becomes critical, and when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all this, the stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied and, being easily irritated, becomes dangerous by going on the attack. For that reason, greater caution is called for than with a malicious one. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reasons, for it is senseless and dangerous." End quote. This reminds me of Isaiah chapter 44 verse 18. "They do not comprehend or understand, for their eyes are blind and do not see, their minds do not discern." End quote. New English Translation. The educated intellectuals use their eloquent words to persuade the rest of us that they have the truth, that they care about us. They promote their religious, philosophic, or scientific ideologies as the solutions to our problems. They justify the stupid actions and atrocities they ask of the stupid with the promise of peace, freedom, and happiness. This is achieved with a three-pronged approach. Remember, a table does not need 4 legs to stand. 3 are enough when positioned properly. It is called a pyramid. The pyramid consists of 3 sides. First, they promise peace through the sanctioned religion, because it is the oldest form of control. They tell us which books we should read, which ones we should not, whose message we should believe, and whose we should not. They say we are not qualified to understand certain writings and books, so they do not translate them or hide them, denying us access to those books and writings. The second is they promise the masses freedom which the government will allow us to have. Government has existed alongside religion since the beginning of time. They act as though they keep freedom locked up somewhere and give it out when they please. Never mind that the masses are already free, that our freedom comes from the Creator God, not from them. If we are prisoners of the government, it is because we allow the government to do so. Like we did during COVID because of the fear they spread. We allowed them to lock us up in our homes, and they kept us away from our jobs, schools, and churches. The third and most important is happiness through education and success. If you accept their indoctrination, you will achieve success and happiness. The government or religion will give you a title and make you someone important in the community. The price of this success and happiness is to sell out your fellow citizens. This education allows them to hypnotize us and instill their thoughts in our minds, hypnotizing the masses to accept what they say is truth. Their truth is the only truth. Anyone who challenges their ideas is a threat to society, our freedoms, and our children, and should be stopped. They accuse others of being intolerant, but hide their intolerance as compassion for others, defending our rights, caring about our health, protecting the rest of us from going to hell, from evil racists, haters, and Nazis. They promote public health crises, group-funded studies, with the specific intent of producing doubt and fear. They are motivated by their greed, biases, and lust for power, provoking the destruction of certain ethnic and religious groups and sections of our society deemed dangerous to the peace and safety of the citizens. They ask us to ignore the fact that they are part of the ruling class responsible for many of the supposed or real abuses. They provoke us to form mobs, large angry crowds, and go out into the streets and demand our rights. They ask us to fight to defend their stupid ideologies and silence and attack those who disagree with them. Think about this. While the George Floyd protests were happening, with the most prominent happening during May and June, continuing on through at least August of 2020. How convenient that the rest of us were locked up at home because of COVID. Even though on May 2020 all 50 states had partially lifted their initial stay-at-home orders. Where were the rest of us? Those that were not a part of this elite group that were immune to COVID. Locked up at home by local and state officials who were trying to protect us from the deadly COVID virus. It wasn't until April 10th, 2023, that Joe Biden officially ended the national emergency. This is a blatant example of how they manipulate us and manage situations and disasters to advance their agendas. Why? Because whatever they are doing is for the best for all of humanity. They are doing it out of self-sacrifice and the goodness of their hearts. What they do not disclose is that we are not considered part of humanity, and the true objective is to be sole rulers of society. These are examples of manipulation by the elites. Edward Bernays is credited with the feat of organizing a campaign to present smoking cigarettes as a symbol of freedom for women and a form of independence and equality with men. This is reminiscent of some of the statements heard today like, "My body, my choice." By convincing women they are being taken advantage of, that their rights are somehow being violated. They can manipulate women into believing, for example, that an abortion is a God-given right, and no government or man has the right to legislate or deprive them of that right. They then accomplish their goal of reducing the population of certain target ethnic groups and classes of people. They do not only do this to women, but they manipulate every group they create. Key words: they create. Whether ethnic, religious, gender, or economic status, these are created with a particular desired purpose and outcome in mind. They divide the human race into different races, then claim one is abusing another and create tensions between the ethnic groups. They tell the poor the rich are taking advantage of them. They tell the taxpayers they are being taken advantage of. The manipulation knows no limits. The following is another example of the government and the elites controlling our minds and thoughts. It is alleged that the sugar industry funded a Harvard research study to downplay the connection between sugar and heart disease and to instead blame saturated fat. So who can you trust? Really, no one. As I mentioned before, not even yourself in some cases. Consider the facts, read, study, don't take anything at face value. As previously mentioned, they tell us what God said or didn't say, what to eat or not eat, who to marry, who not to marry, what to say, what not to say, what books to read and not to read. The manipulation never ends. They truly believe themselves to be superior to the rest and will use any tactic to deceive those they perceive as a moron, unfit, or stupid. It is a well-known secret. They have divided the human race into different races, and they consider themselves the elite and most advanced race. It is now not about skin color or ethnic group. It is about those whom they have deemed the chosen, the ones with the right genes. That's the humanity they want to save, their own. They don't tell us that we are the less evolved lower intelligence creatures, part of the wrong gene pool. We are the wood of their angry fires. We are the ones whose children are to be aborted, killed fighting for their struggle to wrestle power from another elite group, our elderly euthanized, pay the taxes to support their lavish lifestyles. We are to be kept locked in houses and offices working menial jobs, our kids educated to follow our footsteps. Those who manage to rise to notoriety are used to tell the rest of us what we could be if only we were as gifted and talented as they are. We are only to be released as crowds that they control and use to achieve their agenda through violent protests. Gustave Le Bon says when talking about mobs, crowds, notwithstanding all its progress, philosophy has been unable as yet to offer the masses any ideal that can charm them. But, as they must have their illusions at all cost, they turn instinctively, as the insect seeks the light, to the rhetoricians who accord them what they want. Not truth, but error has always been the chief factor in the evolution of nations, and the reason why socialism is so powerful today is that it constitutes the last illusion that is still vital. In spite of all scientific demonstrations, it continues on the increase. Its principal strength lies in the fact that it is championed by minds sufficiently ignorant of things as they are in reality to venture boldly to promise mankind happiness. The social illusion reigns today upon all the heaped-up ruins of the past, and to it belongs the future. The masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error, if error seduce them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim. End quote. What caught my attention in this quote is these words. Its principal strength lies in the fact that it is championed by minds sufficiently ignorant of things as they are in reality to venture boldly to promise mankind happiness. First, this makes my point that ignorant individuals champion beliefs, theories, and concepts based on their flawed, ignorant ideas. This results in stupid conclusions and assumptions that they force down the throats who disagree. The rest of us just blindly follow help in the destruction of those who identify as the enemy. How can any religion, government, science, or philosophy, education promise anyone happiness? Someone said, "Happiness is not a final destination, and no one can take you there." Happiness is a choice we make despite what is going on around us. If you promise anyone happiness, they will want to hurt you very badly when you cannot deliver. I said earlier that humans are born ignorant, and we remain ignorant for the entirety of our lives. Let me explain what I mean. Consider that since you know little or nothing about the past, and whatever you know of history is what you have read, seen on television, or been told. In many cases, what we were told about the past has probably been tainted and manipulated to fit someone's narrative, promote an agenda, or tainted by false memories and exaggerations. Basically, what other stupid people have told us, and we chose to accept as truth. So, we know extraordinarily little about the past or history, and we have no way of knowing how much of it is true. Then consider that we know nothing about the future. We cannot see or predict even 1 second into the future. What if I told you that in 10 years, if you live that long, your life will be nothing like you imagined? You may have lost your hair in the least and be bettered in at worst. You may even say, if I could go back and do it again, I would do this or that differently. And how much do we really know about the people around us? The fact that we cannot read minds or know another person's intentions. We can hear someone's words. We can see a person's actions, and based on what we see and hear, perceive their attitudes, if they are truthful, and their emotions. But we have no way of knowing someone else's true motives or intentions. Your best friend and your spouse could be planning your murder, and you have no way of knowing. Scary thought. Or maybe you deserve it. I don't know. I see the murder plot, but I do not know the motivation. If they explain their warped reasoning, I may want to help them. See what I mean about ignorance? That is how we become stupid. We are presented with observations, theories, and conclusions, and we are convinced that the stupid conclusions justify the actions being proposed. Listen to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote. Upon closer observation, it becomes apparent that every strong upsurge of power in the public sphere, be it of a political or of a religious nature, infects a large part of humankind with stupidity. It would even seem that this is virtually a sociological psychological law. The power of the one needs the stupidity of the other. The process at work here is not that particular human capacities, for instance, the intellect, suddenly atrophy or fail. Instead, it seems that under the overwhelming impact of rising power, humans are deprived of their inner independence and, more or less consciously, give up establishing an autonomous position toward the emerging circumstances. The fact that the stupid person is often stubborn must not blind us to the fact that he is not independent. In conversation with him, one virtually feels that one is dealing not at all with a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of him. He is under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in his very being. Having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will also be capable of any evil and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil. This is where the danger of diabolical misuse lurks, for it is this that can once and for all destroy human beings. Yet at this very point it becomes quite clear that only an act of liberation, not instruction, can overcome stupidity. End quote. Bonhoeffer is saying that a stupid person cannot, and will never, be able to understand that they are indeed stupid. Like I said before, without an external force or influence, the stupid person will never realize their stupidity. Jesus Christ, when he walked the earth as a man, doing good, teaching to love your enemies, healing the sick, rumors he raised the dead, and stopped the winds and the storm at sea. Jesus, however, could not stop the storm of human stupidity. He came to make us aware of our sin and stupidity, but we must admit our stupidity and sin. Man has to change his mind and repent and understand that without God, he will eventually die with and or by his own stupidity. God gave man complete control at the Garden of Eden. He will not go back on his word. He could have performed some great miracle in the sight of those who were accusing him. He chose not to. He knew it would not cure them of their stupidity. For 3.5 years, Jesus had already performed many miracles, and they still refused to believe. In Matthew chapter 9 verse 6 Jesus says, "But look, I will prove to you that the Son of Man has authority to forgive sins." End quote. Complete Jewish Bible. They studied and even taught the Old Testament teachings. They understood only God could forgive sins. Jesus was saying, "Look at me. I am God. I can forgive sins." They refused to see what was right in front of their eyes, like many of us do today, like I did for many years. Think about it, only the Bible and Bible-based religions talk about sin. The other religions are about appeasing a deity, but do not understand that sin or stupidity are a part of the human nature. Continuing, he then said to the paralyzed man, "Get up, pick up your mattress, and go home." End quote. Complete Jewish Bible. Amazing. They saw a paralyzed man get up and walk. They were not impressed. Now that is dumb, if not just plain stupid. Unfortunately, that is how most of us react to God every day. The highly educated rulers of the day, who knew the Torah and prophecies, had first convinced themselves and then the masses that Jesus was a demon, a servant of the evil one. Their religious beliefs called for death, So they crucified him. Blinded by their stupidity, their dogmatic views, their arrogance, and their fear of losing control and power over the people. They not only brought a curse on themselves, but on the people who blindly yelled, "Crucify him." The clergy and rulers of the day did not realize they were bringing to pass the prophecies spoken of by the prophets in their very own religious books. The prophecies spoken by the prophets of the past. The prophecies they studied and read in the temple every week and continued to read until the end of their lives. This reminds me of Newton's law of inertia, also known as his first law of motion, states that an object at rest will remain at rest, and an object in motion will continue moving at a constant speed in a straight line unless acted upon by an external force. Like I said, when we are stupid, we get comfortable with our stupidity and are either at rest or moving towards the demise of our society and at the same time self-destructive end. The stupid person is unaware of what the outcome of their actions will be. Like I said earlier, the stupidity feels safe. For the stupid people, there are no consequences. Those who are injured, arrested, or killed are venerated as martyrs and are happy to die for their stupid ideologies. This is why I believe the external force must be supernatural, and why I personally believe that external supernatural force would be the God of the Bible. Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 10 says, "But I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. I give all people their due rewards, according to what their actions deserve." End quote. New Living Translation. Notice that God does not force the people to change their secret motives. God lets man decide whether to follow his law or not. He makes man aware of his law, but it is up to man to follow his law. This is not a religion, it is a government, a way of life, and a relationship with God. Chapter 9. The Spiritual Roots, from Eden to the Principalities of Darkness. As I have shown, most of our religions, science, philosophies, and politics are based on our observations, theories, and/or someone else's theories or ideas. That is part of our human limitations. It is how we study the world and people around us. It is how we learn, form our opinions and beliefs. That becomes our truth, our worldview. There is another aspect that adds to our stupidity. Remember Adam and Eve in the Bible? I know perhaps you do not believe in the Bible, but humor me for a minute. The very first stupid act according to the Bible was done by Adam and Eve. The serpent deceived Eve, then she convinced Adam to join her crowd. And so sin and stupidity entered the world. They were deceived, acted stupidly, and disobeyed and lost eternal life. They pretty much in the process cursed the human race, and like them we lost eternal life and exposed us to eternal death. Fitting the definition of what a stupid person is, hurts others and gains nothing or even incurs personal loss. So who deceived them? The hypnotizer is called the serpent. As a result, you and I are just one more lost person in a sea of lost people. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will also be capable of any evil and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil. End quote. They became a mindless tool of the serpent. So who are the true instigators and responsible for the poisoning of the crowd's minds? These people usually remain hidden in the background and never face the consequences of the atrocious actions of the crowd. Have you ever wondered who contributed to the creation of Hitler's philosophy and politics? The hypnotizers, the external forces that motivated Hitler? That person or persons quietly disappeared from history and were never to be seen again. Real accountability comes when the manipulators of the crowds are caught and held accountable. These are usually people in authority or well-known and trusted philosophers, scientists, or religious leaders. Many of these philosophers come from affluent families, are highly educated, and in some cases feel guilty of their good fortune. Others are just arrogant and feel superior to the rest. They look down on the less fortunate, and while they may not admit it publicly, and exhibit a false moral outrage, they expound philosophical, scientific, or religious points of view that seem to make sense but are actually stupid. Where does their inspiration come from? How is it that all these people who do not even know each other come up with similar stupid ideas? I believe it to be a spiritual force. Check out what Daniel chapter 10 verses 12 through 13 say. Then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But, lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days. End quote. King James Amplified Version. Notice first, when Daniel wrote that the messenger said, From the first day you set out to understand and submitted to God, he heard your words and sent me to give you an answer. Then he adds, But the prince of Persia obstructed me for 21 days. The prince of Persia is not a person. It is a dark spirit that controls the dark forces over Persia. Today, I believe these dark forces are all around us, impeding us from coming to the full knowledge of God. They are the force that pushes us into our stupidity. Some of us become the highly educated person I previously mentioned, and these spirits take control of them or us, and expound the stupid philosophical, scientific, or religious point of view. Of course, being influenced by our ignorance, dogmas, fears, and lusts, we blindly follow down the path of stupidity. Many of these people do not risk themselves or lives. They merely point out the injustices and provoke others to action. They write plays or books, make movies, give speeches, preach sermons, but they never get physically involved. I am not talking about the leaders who are at the front of the crowds, yelling the slogans, pointing out the injustices. I am talking about those who finance and promote the stupid ideas. They are not as stupid as the rest of us. They are politically connected, own large newspapers or television stations, and are large internet sites, where they keep track of and influence all of us. I use the word us because we are all susceptible to becoming stupid, and in many ways, we may already be. They usually stay in the background and get the rest of us riled up. They, like Eve, influenced Adam. They entice us with subtle words to act on their stupid ideologies. Many of us blindly fall prey to their ideologies. I believe they are guided by spirits that are in direct opposition to the plan God has for the world. You see the crowds responding to the calls of the great philosophers, or hear of some unknown person shooting someone who disagrees with the words spoken by some other teacher. First, we forget these are mere humans that could be wrong. Secondly, when it comes to violent religious ideologies, I ask if their God is so great, why do they have to defend the God? Can't the God just defend himself if he is so great? As a previous boss would say, just saying. Look at what Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12 says. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. End quote. New International Version. Okay, so you are highly educated and you do not believe in God, the Bible, or spirits. But hear me out, please. What if it is real? What if there is a God, and there are these spiritual beings trying to make sure you never hear about or believe in that God? Ask yourself, what if the clergy, scientists, politicians, and philosophers who have influenced what we believe and accept as truth are wrong or even stupid? What if our stupidity comes from spiritual ignorance and the deceptions they propagate? What if the reason that every human is stupid is because we are spiritually dead? If the issue is a spiritual one, we will never come to the full realization that we are stupid without a supernatural or spiritual awakening. Think about it. What do you have to lose if you live according to the teachings of Jesus and the commandments in the Bible and allowed His Spirit to guide you? Think of the heartaches you would save yourself, but you have to ask Him to reveal Himself to show you He is there. Like I said earlier, if an external force does not reveal it to us, we will never know. I can convince you that you are stupid and in desperate need of God today, and tomorrow a more eloquent speaker can convince you otherwise. It comes down to a choice. Do you believe Charles Darwin is right or that Moses and the Bible are right? That is all I am going to say about it. I am not trying to win a debate. Gustave Le Bon wrote, "The philosophers of the last century devoted themselves with fervor to the destruction of the religious, political, and social illusions on which our forefathers had lived for a long tale of centuries. By destroying them, they have dried up the springs of hope and resignation. Behind the immolated chimeras, they came face to face with the blind and silent forces of nature, which are inexorable to weakness and ignore pity." End quote. Mr. Le Bon is pointing out that men like Friedrich Nietzsche, Karl Marx, François-Marie Arouet, better known as Voltaire, and Sigmund Freud and many others were responsible for the destruction of the religious, political, and social illusions of the past. Gustave later continues when speaking of contagion. Contagion is so powerful that it forces upon individuals not only certain opinions, but certain modes of feeling as well. Contagion is the cause of the contempt in which, at a given period, certain works are held. He continues saying, "The opinions and beliefs of crowds are specially propagated by contagion, but never by reasoning. The conceptions at present rife among the working classes have been acquired at the public house as the result of affirmation, repetition, and contagion, and indeed the mode of creation of the beliefs of crowds of every age has scarcely been different." Renan justly institutes a comparison between the first founders of Christianity and the socialist working men spreading their ideas from public house to public house, while Voltaire had already observed in connection with the Christian religion that for more than 100 years it was only embraced by the vilest riffraff. End quote. It seems to me that the unscrupulous religious leaders made God and the Bible look foolish. This frustrated many. This produced and fueled the philosophers and scientists. These individuals became disenchanted and lost their faith. They concluded that the biblical writings were myths and lost their faith in God. Many were even persecuted by the different religions and beliefs. Some were imprisoned and even killed, burned alive, and many other atrocities, all in the name of a loving God. This is the cause for so much hatred of God and the Bible by many. Then all these highly educated, fast-talking individuals, both religious and secular, easily through arguments and eloquent words embed their thoughts and ideas into society, and the rest of us blindly follow. Societies and governments accept their ideas as truth. Policies are created and laws passed based on these religious and scientific philosophies. Think about many of the old biblical characters had more than one wife. Today that is against the law in many countries. I am not proposing we should allow polygamy, just pointing out a fact. These supposedly great men spout their ideas, and they just seem to make sense. Many of these great men at times seem to possess special powers and abilities. They seem to have access to knowledge the rest do not. For example, they seem to understand the secret to obtaining wealth, predict the weather, the flow of electricity, the origin of things and life, and so much more. They seem to possess superhuman abilities and intelligence. They attack the established ideas of religion, the existence of God and biology, and philosophical points of view with an almost enraged fury. But why would God allow this to happen if he is God? Because the God of the Bible is not the God of this world. Yes, he created this world, but the ruling authority was given to mankind. Mankind in turn has relinquished his authority on earth to the rulers of the darkness. The darkness that is now in his heart, our hearts to be exact. The God of this world is Satan, who holds limited influence over unbelievers, but is ultimately under God's sovereign control. End quote. Source Copilot Search. I believe these abilities come from the dark spirits that rule this world and influences the non-believers. Yes, there are non-believers controlling many of the religious, philosophical schools of thought and scientific organizations. In some cases, they may not be aware of the spiritual influence. They attribute it to luck, good genes, or being gifted, or some may even consider themselves to be supernatural. Chapter 10. Eugenics, Scientific Racism, and the Lies That Still Poison Us. A perfect example of man's ideologies and suppositions spread by contagion is the division of the human race into distinct groups ranked by the development along the evolution scale and genetic makeup. These false ideas were espoused and promoted, largely developed by 16th through 18th century European naturalists and anthropologists seeking to classify humanity like flora and fauna. For those who did not attend a university like me, flora refers to all plant life in a region, while fauna encompasses all animal life, together forming the living components of ecosystems. End quote. Source Microsoft Copilot. Among the European naturalists and anthropologists, key figures included Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, 1752 to 1840, a German professor considered a founder of anthropology. He coined the term Caucasian in 1795 and divided humans into 5 varieties based on skull shapes and skin color. Carolus Linnaeus, 1707 to 1778, Swedish botanist who, in his 10th edition of Systema Naturae, 1758, classified humans into 4 geographical varieties: Europaeus, Americanus, Asiaticus, Africanus, incorporating subjective cultural stereotypes. François Bernier, 1620 to 1688, a French physician who proposed one of the earliest, albeit less influential, 4 or 5 race divisions in 1684. Samuel George Morton, 1799 to 1851, an American physician who used craniometry, skull measurement, to argue that races were separate species with different intellectual capacities, providing scientific legitimacy to racism. Lord Kames, Henry Home, 1696 to 1782, a Scottish philosopher who argued for polygenism, claiming different races were created separately by God. These all ignored the writings in the Bible and chose a different path. Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, his theories had a profound, albeit complex and often indirect, influence on 19th century skull measurement, craniometry, and the development of race theory. While Darwin was a proponent of monogenism, all humans sharing a common ancestor, and opposed slavery, his works, particularly The Descent of Man, 1871, provided a biological framework that proponents of scientific racism utilized to rank human groups hierarchically. Darwin's theories were used to provide a scientific veneer to pre-existing racist beliefs, with studies showing a surge in biological arguments for racism following the acceptance of evolutionary theory. While Darwin himself may not have intended for his theories to be used to justify extreme racism or eugenics, His writing on human evolution and his reliance on contemporary, biased scientific studies on cranial capacity provided the scientific foundation that others used to promote these ideologies. End quote. Source: Google AI and other online sources. Francis Galton, 1822 to 1911. More on him later. Religions were not helpful in promoting faith in the God of the Bible either. Let us just say that religions have not always lived up to the teachings of Jesus and loving their enemies. The Crusades are a prime example, and fueled religious intolerance, causing increased hostility toward Muslims, Eastern Orthodox Christians, and Jewish communities. The failure to retain the Holy Land contributed to shifting perceptions of God's will, with some viewing the conflicts as human folly. Historically, periods of intense, bloody conflict, such as the European wars of the 16th and 17th centuries, played a major role in the rise of secularism, as people sought alternatives to sectarian violence. Distrust of religious authority. The use of religion to justify abuse, hatred, or exclusion, sometimes described as a false idol that demands sacrifices, and the immorality of many religious leaders caused many to abandon faith. End quote. Source: Google AI. Gustave Le Bon's quote ends by saying that this rejection of the traditional beliefs brought societies face to face with the stupidity of the human race. No compassion, no mercy, no pity for those they deemed worthy of the wrath of the philosophical, religious, or scientific beliefs of the crowd. Think about it. Accusing women of being witches and burning them alive, enslaving those deemed less evolved, aborting and sterilizing of certain ethnic groups to prevent the propagation of that group. All the atrocities and genocides by the different religions, sacrificing children to pagan gods, and the stupid scientific theories like eugenics and evolution, and dividing the human race into different races. I can almost hear the elites tell the masses, just trust the process. When I hear those words from someone, I head for the door. By claiming some racial groups were further down the scale of evolution, by pointing out physical differences, they justify these ideas. They use skin color, skull measurements, and other so-called scientific studies. Using their theories and stupid opinions, they form pseudo-scientific ideas about God, the weather, the human mind. They come up with terms like climate change, Planned Parenthood, gender dysphoria, eugenics, and evolution. So many other stupid ideas explained by pseudosciences. They come up with all these ideas based on conclusions from their observations, influenced by their ignorance, stupidity, lusts, dogmas, and fears. Some do not really believe these ideas, but get paid to promote these tactics and are used to control the masses. For example, claiming we evolved from sea life and animals, and then using these ideas to enslave, control, and annihilate other ethnic groups. Michel de Montaigne, one of the most significant philosophers of the French Renaissance, said, "It is taking one's conjectures rather seriously to roast someone alive for them." End quote. As we have seen, a stupid person is never wrong, justifies all their actions. This makes us all very dangerous when we don't acknowledge that we are capable of being stupid. Gustave Le Bon said, "One of the most constant characteristics of beliefs is their intolerance. The stronger the belief, the greater its intolerance. Men dominated by a certitude cannot tolerate those who do not accept it." End quote. All the old empires enslaved persons from other countries and ethnic groups. To the best of my knowledge, they did not justify it by claiming the slaves were of a lower evolved state and classified them as part animal. I believe they understood man came from a creator God. They, on the other hand, claimed to be descendants of gods, sons of a woman and a god. So that is what gave them the right to rule over the others. I wonder if the royal family of the UK and other people who go by the title of king, queen, or prince think they are descendants of the gods, or that they are higher up on the evolutionary ladder. Perhaps we should ask them. Even the Bible in Genesis chapter 6 verse 2, it says the following: "The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." End quote. King James Version. This passage is often interpreted as referring to divine beings or angels who interacted with humans, leading to the birth of the Nephilim. So, the Babylonians, Romans, and Greeks, and many of the ancient cultures, I believe, used these stories to claim to be descendants of the gods. They could then justify enslaving those who were not. The Europeans, on the other hand, rejecting the teaching of the Bible and other religions as myths and wives' tales, rejecting the existence of God or gods, developed a naturalistic approach to the idea. They turned it into a science to justify enslaving and the killing of the children of the other ethnic groups. By claiming that some people were closer to animals than human and others were closer to gods, they justified their action and at the same time appeased the conscience of those who might feel guilt. I would simply say that their ignorance led them to make stupid assumptions based on their observations, lusts, dogmas, and fears. I would say that is exactly what Francis Galton did when he came up with his ideas on eugenics. The people in power liked it because they feared the lower-class people would eventually rule them. It made them special and better than the rest of us, and it was not part of what they felt was discredited religious ideas. In the meantime, us, the stupid, well, we accepted it as science. We liked it too, because if there is no God, we could do as we pleased and not worry about the afterlife. This was an idea promoted by Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin. There were, of course, as we saw earlier, many so-called bright individuals who had contributed to the arduous work of dividing and classifying humans into races and different levels of evolution. It is interesting to note that they felt they were at the top of the pyramid. However, Francis Galton and the eugenics movement, which he based on his cousin's Charles' theories of evolution, divided the human race further into what he termed as the fit and the unfit. He believed that the unfit should not be allowed to reproduce. Based on a book he wrote calling his theories eugenics, he helped start a movement, the eugenics movement. In the U.S., it was used to regulate reproduction, marriage, promoted forced sterilizations, and the weeding out of the inferior unfit persons. It came to be known as scientific racism. And I believe a lot of popular ideas prevalent in societies around the world today are influenced by the now debunked eugenics pseudoscience. People like Charles Davenport, Harry H. Laughlin, Margaret Sanger, John Rockefeller, and many other wealthy philanthropists and powerful political figures used their influence to pass eugenics laws in the U.S. In the 1920s, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. famously wrote, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." He was talking about a young lady, about performing an operation to sterilize this young woman. Her name, Carrie Buck, a poor white abused young lady. She received no compassion, no mercy, only disdain, and was a victim of plain stupidity. With this decision, the Supreme Court of the United States was giving the states the right to find, basically hunt, the unfit, the imbeciles in society, and stop them from reproducing. And the rest of the stupid people, our parents and us, just accepted it and followed along. Under the guise of science and medical research, thousands were forcibly sterilized in the U.S. People who pointed out the abuse were probably called conspiracy theorists. Sound familiar? Even prominent black leaders advocated the so-called science of eugenics. Pascal Robert wrote in an article, "Throughout African American history, members of the black elite have blamed the black poor for bringing down the race, thus giving aid and comfort to white racists." calls by Negro reformers to improve the quality of the race often imbibed eugenic language. Mr. Robert continues saying, Black and white eugenicists alike linked the Negro problem to black female fertility. The black misleadership class is a term usually referring to the race management elite that developed out of the civil rights movement to handle the political and social affairs of the black masses. This group tailors its worldview and policy prescriptions to the demands of America's majority power elite to the detriment of those same black masses. The article says that leaders like Booker T. Washington and Webb Du Bois fully supported this movement. He also mentions the following in this article. Thomas Garth, for instance, wrote in a 1930 Opportunity magazine article that Negroes could have no race pride in substandard members of the race. He posited that the race should seek to eliminate them, weed them out, and thereby obtain by means of selection a better stock. Terms like weeding out and eliminating speak directly to the identification of dysgenic members of the race and their segregation from larger society through reformatory or prison commitments. End of the article. Please support Pascal Roberts' efforts by reading the article on the website below, and any other support, I am sure, is welcomed. The point I am making is we are quick to accept teachings and beliefs from these so-called intellectuals. We must never forget they are mere men driven by their ignorance, prejudices, dogmas, fears, lusts, and their emotional well-being, or lack thereof. https://www.blackagendia-report.com/black_sterilization_black_poor. Other countries adopted the eugenics laws of the U.S., including Germany. Adolf Hitler used these so-called scientific ideas to murder millions of Jews. Many of these laws were still being used in the U.S. up to the 1970s. This is by no means a study on eugenics. I am pointing out our stupidity and how we blindly follow. If you want to know more or doubt what I am saying, do some research. Another example is the following. In November 1969, Paul Ehrlich said the time of famines is upon us and will be at its worst and most disastrous by 1975. He said the population of the United States is already too big, that birth control may have to be accomplished by making it involuntary and by putting sterilizing agents into staple foods and drinking water, and that the Roman Catholic Church should be pressured into going along with routine measures of population control. End quote. Population control? Sound familiar? Reminiscent of the eugenics movement, I would say, and we blindly follow. It is interesting to note that in 1969, President Richard Nixon addressed the growing concern of overpopulation by proposing the Commission on Population Growth and the American Future, which was formally established by Congress in early 1970. This initiative aimed to assess the impact of population growth on natural resources, the environment, and government services. End quote. I wonder what measures were put in place by our leaders that they felt were best not divulged to the public. According to a New York Times article, The Long Shadow of Eugenics in America, the New York Times, the Richard Nixon administration was sued over practices associated with eugenics and forced sterilization. Specifically, the lawsuit Ralph versus Weinberger, 1974, was filed against the administration regarding the involuntary sterilization of thousands of mostly Black, Latina, and Indigenous women funded through federal programs. By the way, in a 1969 New York Times article, Ehrlich was quoted saying that the trouble with almost all environmental problems is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, you're dead. We must realize that unless we're extremely lucky, everybody will disappear in a cloud of blue steam in 20 years. End quote. That would have been in 1989, and of course no one disappeared in a cloud of blue steam. I will also add that as of February 2026, the famines have not reached the United States, as Paul Ehrlich threatened. Yet these highly educated, so-called intelligent idiots continue to promote their stupid ideas. Threats of environmental collapse, climate change, running out of resources. Unless we control the population of the unworthy, the less evolved, the unfit. They give themselves the power to decide whose lineage should be erased. Then the stupid people in the media and politicians, who are either paid to promote or fall for the teachings, philosophies, false and misguided scientific and religious views, spread them to the world. Then those of us who fall for their deceit, and in an effort to prove we are smart and belong to the educated elite, spread these beliefs to others. When one stupid idea is proven to be stupid, they either dig in and will not accept the evidence or come up with some new stupid idea. They are so convinced of their conclusions they feel compelled to force the rest to comply. And these same stupid individuals then form crowds and want to at a minimum ostracize, or at most imprison or worst kill those who will not submit to their stupid ideas. Gustave Le Bon says when talking about crowds, notwithstanding all its progress, philosophy has been unable as yet to offer the masses any ideal that can charm them. But as they must have their illusions at all cost, they turn instinctively, as the insect seeks the light, to the rhetoricians who accord them what they want. Not truth, but error has always been the chief factor in the evolution of nations. And the reason why socialism is so powerful today is that it constitutes the last illusion that is still vital. In spite of all scientific demonstrations, it continues on the increase. Its principal strength lies in the fact that it is championed by minds sufficiently ignorant of things as they are in reality to venture boldly to promise mankind happiness. The social illusion reigns today upon all the heaped-up ruins of the past, and to it belongs the future. The masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error, if error seduce them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim. End quote. He is saying these philosophers promise man happiness. Today we call it freedom, rights, or equity and equality, the right to do as we please, to be brave to question the laws of God. But do not dare to question them. You don't have the right to disagree with their conclusions. They can question and hate you, and accuse you of hating them. So they justify their hatred of you. They are so sure of their beliefs that they are, in some cases, willing to kill someone who disagrees with their opinions, no matter how stupid those opinions or conclusions may be. Some of the most recent examples are COVID, gender dysphoria, and climate change.